from extensive livestock breeding to intensive livestock breeding in Brazil. So in Brazil, have around 170 million hectares available to livestock. Main of these lands is grasslands, and we have the largest commercial herd in the world. So we have in Brazil two kind of lands, subtropical lands and tropical lands. In the center of Brazil and north of Brazil, the main breed is Nelore and Brahman cattle from beef cattle. And for dairy cattle, we have Girolando, that is a crossbreed with Holstein and Zebu. And in South Brazil, in subtropical areas, we have Hereford breed, Aberdeen Angus breed for beef cattle, and Holstein and Jersey for dairy cattle, and crossbreeds with Zebu. 90% of beef cattle in Brazil is beef cattle, and 10% is dairy cattle. Talking just about the beef cattle, the beef cattle chain last year handled around $170 billion, and 82% of these animals were in grassland or grass feed based, and 17 animals are finished in feedlots. So we produce around 10 million tons, and this 10 million tons, 75% is for internal market, and 25% is exported. The main buyer of meat of Brazil is China, followed by United States. And the dairy cattle chain handled $32 billion last year, and we produce around 35 billion liters of milk, and almost all the production is for internal market. In the darkest zone in the map is where the dairy cattle are. So in South Brazil is in this part, 3 states of Brazil, where is Holstein and Jersey. And the center of Brazil and north of Brazil, it's Girolando and another crossbreeds with Zebu or Bos Indicus. So to achieve this status in the world, Brazil crossed for many situations. So now I will tell you a brief story of livestock in Brazil. So this story starts in 1550, where people estimated that is the first bovines in Brazil. They are used for traction in agriculture and milk production. So 608, beginning of livestock in South Brazil to produce meat and leather. This production was sent to center of Brazil to colony. So people need to change this meat production in jerked beef form to send for the center of Brazil in the colony. 860 to 808 was a very important point in our story. So was the first bovine Zebu or Bos Indicus imported to Brazil. So this allowed to start the production of meat and livestock in the center of Brazil in tropical areas, as the other herds can't go there because the is not adapted to these areas. 906 was the first Aberdeen Angus and Hereford bulls imported to Brazil. These animals came from Argentina and Uruguay. And in the same year, people started to the first pedigree records. And 68 was the implementation of weight development control. That is a previous for our breeding program in Brazil. And 74 was the implementation of the beef cattle breeding program, the named Promebo. Promebo is still working nowadays, so it's the oldest breeding program in Brazil. And 88 was created the Nelore Brazil breeding program. That is a Zebu or Bos Indicus breeding program. It also is still working nowadays. And 91 was the adoption of a mixed model methodology or by Promebo to obtain the estimated breeding values for all the animals in the pedigree. This adoption spent almost 2 years, and in 91 was the edition of the first cited genetic evaluation report for Taurino cattle breeds, Aberdeen Angus, Charolais, and Hereford animals, and Devon animals. And in 93 was created the PNMGL breeding program. That is the Girolando breeding program. It's a dairy cattle breed. So the traits evaluated in these years was birth weight, winning weight gain, yearling weight gain, some visual scores, conformation, precocity, and muscling, and also milk production. In 95 was the first ultrasound carcass traits measures in beef cattle. So spent around 5 years collecting measures in animals to launch the first site evaluation report for carcass traits. All these carcass traits measured by ultrasound. So the carcass traits was ribeye muscular area, marbling, and fat. And in these years, the 2000 years, have an increase and massive use of artificial insemination. This point is very important in Brazil because allow producers to access better bulls, so the farmers can improve their herds. And in 2000 to 2010, people start to estimate genetic parameters and implementation of new traits on the genetic evaluations. Basically carcass traits, reproductive traits, and another traits that the farmers want. So it depends on the breeding program, the traits that are evaluated in these years. And talking about a little about genomic selection, in 2003 was the first bovine on the world with genome sequenced, the cow named Dominette. And then 2009 was the first Zebu with genome sequenced. It's a Brazilian bull, and the name is Futuro. So in these years, people start to study and make researches in genomic selection. And in South Brazil, people start to use GBLUP for Hereford and Braford breeds and launch the first genomic evaluation report for tick resistance trait in the world. Fernando Cardoso, the next speaker, was the head of this research, and in 2016 people start to use GBLUP in Girolamo breed in Brazil. So this research and these studies was to select to selection for difficult to measure traits as meat equality. In Brazil, we have some difficulties to collect phenotypes of meat because in the slaughtered houses is very difficult to collect some data. Feed efficiency for residual feed intake, people start to use genomic selection for this, methane emissions, and adaptation traits. And also the use of genomic selection to increase the accuracy of the APGs for traditional traits already measured in Brazil. Here is the report for genomic evaluation for tick resistance. Tick is a huge problem in Brazil because don't allow many animals to go to tropical areas. So selecting animals more resistant to tick, we can send animals and genetic for tropical areas for crossbreed with Nelore and improve meat quality. For example, sending semen of Aberdeen Angus or Hereford breeds more adapted to or more resistance to tick, for example. Another trait that it's already in study or next step for adaptation traits is there are studies in bovine keratoconjunctivitis and ocular squamous carcinoma. So people start to collect phenotypes and genotypes for animals to make associations. To next years can provide provide APDs for genomic APDs for these traits and select animals more resistant for this kind of disease. And another important point here is the size of the hair. In Aberdeen Angus and Hereford animals, Bos Taurus animals, because we can select animals more resistant for heat stress. So there are studies, not just in Brazil, but in other countries, that know that 33% of the variation of the size of the hair in animals are in chromosome 5. So we can select genotype animals and know if the next generation have genes for higher hair or lower hair, for example. So we can select animals more adapted to tropical areas. For dairy cattle also, we study heat stress or select animals more adapted to heat stress. So this kind of trait is very important in Brazil because the higher part of Brazil are in tropical areas. So we need animals that are more adapted to heat stress. And another kind of trait that people are studying is functional traits. So for example, one functional trait, it's the pollen trait in Bos indicus or in Nelore or Brahman. So we can genotype animals and know if this animal will pass for the next generations genes that express or not horn in the next generation. So genotype animals and use genomic selection, or we can say we can know this kind of thing. For example, the in the chromosome 1, we know that is the polyd locus, and there are many genes that express the polyd trait. Here are some breeding programs in Brazil that nowadays working with genomic selection. PNMGL, for example, for dairy cattle in Girolando cattle, and others for Zebu or Bostaurus breeds. And here we can see the how effective is the genetic selection in Brazil. Or, for example, in the green graph is the percentage of steers finished over 36 months old. So in 97, we have around 60% of the animals finished over 36 months. So delayed a lot. And in 2021, we have just 10% or 11% animals finished over 36 months old. So we improve a lot this phase. So when we see the genetic trends for Promebo, for example, in Aberdeen Angus breed, for yearling weight and ribeye muscle area, that is two traits related to size, to finish size of animals, we can see that the genetic trend was increasing a lot in these years. So we know that the age, the finished age, is not just genetic. There is another things, but we think that the genetic contribution is big here. And when we saw the dairy cattle, for dairy cattle, we can see that the milk production in Brazil was increasing in the last years, but the Brazilian dairy herd in last years was decreasing a lot. Basically, because the costs or the production costs, but the milk production per cow is increasing a lot in last years in Brazil. So when we saw the genetic trends for milk production in the PNMGL for Girolando breed, we can see that this genetic trend is increasing in the last years. So in the same way that beef cattle, we think that the genetic contribution in the results is big too. And to finish, here is the Brazilian bull semen market. We can see here that the semen importation and semen exportations. So beef cattle semen importation and exportations was increasing a lot in the last years, and also for dairy cattle. So people start to increase they use the national genetic semen, and also have much importations. And when we see this is another graph with these three colors. In green is the percentage of cows inseminated in Brazil per year. So we can see that 23% of the cows in Brazil are inseminated at least one time per year. And in beef cattle is the red color. It's higher. It's 26% of the animals, the cows, are inseminated at least one time per year. So it represents around 30 million of animals. And also in dairy cattle, it's around 12% of the cows inseminated in Brazil. per year. So I think can contribute a little about the story, tell you a little about the story of Brazil, and I'm happy to ask some questions. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Rodrigo. That was really interesting.
So thank you, Rodrigo, and I like this presentation a lot. I even tried this milk there in Latin America. It was very tasty milk, great breed. So my question is, because I work with sheep, so what about your genomic selection of sheep? So this is my main question.
Sheep. I'll tell another story. Sheep in Brazil have breeding program in 84 to 95, and then the breeding program closed. And last year we start a new breeding program in Brazil that we develop, or our company start to do it. So I think in the next years we start to work with genomic selection, but nowadays we don't have genomic selection in sheep. I think in all Brazil. I don't know if another companies are working on that, but I don't think so.
Thank you, Rodrigo. Leila, I'm sorry to interrupting you. I thought that was interpretation problems with the audio tracks. Okay.
If you want, I tell, I speak again. I can explain again.
Thank you for your answer.
Thank you, Rodrigo. We have 2 more questions for you. How you defined selection? How you define breeding goals? Is there national goals for your cattle, or they depend on the district?
They depend on the district, because Brazil is a big country, and there is many kinds of livestock in Brazil, for example. So in South Brazil, we make a selection index. Last year's was is not an economic index, so now we implemented an economic index in some breeding programs. So I think next years will be just economic index for all breeding programs. People start to do it in Brazil.
Okay, thank you, Rodrigo. Unfortunately, we don't have time for other questions. If you will be able to answer them to us, if you send it to you in the email, that would be really great. We'll forward it to our audience. Thank you, Rodrigo. Thank you again. That was really interesting.